Peace and love, soul family, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Goddess Ṣómìde de la Terre, and today we will be reading the introduction to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I wanted to read this book aloud for YouTube because I recognize that there aren't a lot of women, especially indigenous melanated women, who have really tapped into this book. And I feel like this book has so many gems that can relate to all people, not just males. I wanted to tap into this book specifically because this book carries so many nuggets of wisdom in how to really tap into, access, and actualize your manifestation power. If you didn't know, we are all creators, co-creators of this world, of this whole experience. And so a lot of the things that we experience, we manifest, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So a part of my intention is to make my walk an intentional one, and so that I learn to be responsible with my manifestation power. And I think this book, Think and Grow Rich, is great for that journey. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh yeah, I'm also reading from my Kindle. I know typically y'all see me holding books, but I was gifted this Kindle over a year ago and I don't use it. So I thought that I'd give it a try for this book. So we'll see how that goes as we maneuver through this journey. All right, introduction. The man who thought his way into partnership with Thomas A. Edison. Truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that. And where they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and burning desire for their translation into riches or other material objects. A little more than 30 years ago, Edwin C. Barnes discovered how true it is that men really do think and grow rich. His discovery did not come about at one sitting. It came little by little, beginning with a burning desire to become a business associate of the great Edison. One of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. Observe carefully the description of how he went about translating his desire into reality, and you will have a better understanding of the 13 principles which lead to riches. When this desire or impulse of thought first flashed into his mind, he was in no position to act upon it. Two difficulties stood in his way. One, he did not know Mr. Edison, and two, he did not have enough money to pay his railroad fare to Orange, New Jersey. These difficulties were sufficient to have discouraged the majority of men from making any attempt to carry out the desire. But his was no ordinary desire. He was so determined to find a way to carry out his desire that he finally decided to travel by blind baggage rather than be defeated. To the uninitiated, this means that he went to East Orange on a freight train. He presented himself at Mr. Edison's laboratory and announced he had come to go into business with the inventor. And speaking of the first meeting between Barnes and Edison, years later, Mr. Edison said, "He stood there before me looking like an ordinary tramp, but there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had come after. I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. Subsequent events proved that no mistake was made." Just what young Barnes said to Mr. Edison on that occasion was far less important than that which he thought. Edison himself said so. It could not have been the young man's appearance which got him his start in the Edison's office, for that was definitely against him. It was what he thought that counted. If the significance of this statement could be conveyed to every person who reads it, there would be no need for the remainder of this book. Barnes did not get his partnership with Edison on his first interview. He did get a chance to work in the Edison's offices at a very nominal wage, doing work that was unimportant to Edison, but most important to Barnes because it gave him an opportunity to display his merchandise where his intended partner could see it. Months went by. Apparently, nothing happened to bring the coveted goal, which Barnes had set up in his mind as his definite major purpose. But something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. Psychologists have correctly said that when one is truly ready for a thing, it puts it into its appearance. Barnes was ready for a business association with Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got that which he was seeking. He did not say to himself, well, what's the use? I guess I'll change my mind and try for a salesman's job. But he did say, I came here to go into business with Edison, and I'll accomplish this thing if it takes the remainder of my life. And he meant it. What a different story men would have to tell if only they would adopt a definite purpose and stand by that purpose until it had time to become an all-consuming obsession. Maybe young Barnes did not know it at the time, but his bulldog determination, his persistence in standing back of a single desire was destined to mow down all opposition and bring him the opportunity he was seeking. And when the opportunity came, it appeared in a different form and from a different direction than Barnes had expected. That is one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping in by the back door, and often it comes disguised in the form of misfortune or a temporary defeat. Perhaps this is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. Ooh, that's powerful. That's an exercise of faith. It says that opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune. I know so many of us can relate to that. I know that I can relate to that, where something felt on the surface like misfortune. It felt like a tragedy or a negative thing, but turned out to absolutely be a blessing. And so I'm going to continue on. Mr. Edison had just perfected a new office device known at the time as the Edison dictating machine, now the Ediphone. His salesmen were not enthusiastic over the machine. They did not believe it could be sold without great effort. Barnes saw his opportunity. It had crawled and quietly hidden in a queer-looking machine which interested no one but Barnes and the inventor. Barnes knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested this to Edison and promptly got his chance. He did sell the machine. In fact, he sold it so successfully that Edison gave him a contract to distribute and market it all over the nation. Out of that business association grew the slogan, made by Edison and installed by Barnes. The business alliance has been in operation for more than 30 years. Out of it, Barnes has made himself rich in money, but he has done something infinitely greater. He has proved that one really may think and grow rich. How much actual cash that original desire of Barnes has been worth to him, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps it has brought him $2 or $3 billion, but the amount, whatever it is, becomes insignificant when compared with the greater asset he required in the form of definite knowledge that an intangible pulse of thought can be transmuted into its physical counterpart by the application of these known principles. Barnes literally thought himself into the partnership with the great Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with except the capacity to know what he wanted and the determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. He had no money to begin with. He had but little education. He had no influence, but he did have initiative, faith, and the will to win. With these intangible forces, he made himself #1 man with the greatest inventor who ever lived. Now, let us look at a different situation and study a man who had plenty of tangible evidence of riches, but lost it because he stopped 3 feet short of the goal he was seeking. So the next story is called 3 Feet from Gold. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. He had never heard that more gold has been mined from the brains of men than has ever been taken from the earth. He staked the claim and went to work with pick and shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for gold was definite. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of the shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface, and quietly, he covered up the mine, retracted his steps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike. They got together the money for the needed machinery, had it shipped. The uncle and Darby went back to work the mine. The first car of ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of that ore would clear the debts. Then would come the big killing of the profits. The big killing in profits. And down went the drills. Up went the hopes of Darby and Uncle. Then something happened. The vein of gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow and the pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on desperately trying to pick the vein again, all to no avail. So finally they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. Some junk men are dumb, but not this one. He called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. His calculations showed that a vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. 3 feet. And this is exactly where it was found. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. How many times have you given up 3 feet from gold because you refuse to seek expert counsel? You refuse to ask for help. You refuse to accept help. I love this because sometimes our wisdom, our knowledge, what we know, what we think we know, it literally can only get us so far until we find someone else to help activate something new within us. It's an expert. It's a therapist, depending on what it is. You're not good with your finances, an accountant. Like, how often do we shorten our successes because we refuse to seek the help that we need before giving up? Many of us are stagnant right now because we refuse to receive. And so the Darbys literally paid all of this money, put all of this time into digging and getting this machine, and stopped 3 feet from their goal. So most of the money which went into the machinery was procured through the efforts of R.U. Darby, who was then a very young man, and the money came from his relatives and neighbors because of their faith in him. He paid back every dollar of it, although he was years in doing so. And long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his loss many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into business of selling life insurance. And remember that he lost a huge fortune because he stopped 3 feet from gold. Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby is one of a small group of fewer than 50 men who sell more than $1 million in life insurance annually. And he owes his stickability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. Before success comes in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failure. And when defeat overtakes a man, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. And this is exactly what the majority of men do. More than 500 of the most successful men this country has ever known told the author their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one when success is almost within reach. It takes great delight, failure does, in tripping one when success is almost within reach. And then I'm going to read this one last lesson, one last story, and then from there I'll close it up because I don't want to give too much too soon. I think that 3 stories is a lot to process and digest before moving on. And it may take a few times listening to the story for it to really integrate into your experience, into your consciousness. All right, so the next one is a 50-cent lesson in persistence. Shortly after Mr. Darby received his degree from the University of Hard Knocks and had decided to profit by his experience in the gold mining business, he had the fortune to be present on an occasion that proved to him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon, he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of colored sharecrop farmers lived. Quietly, the door was open and a small colored child, the daughter of a tenant, walked in and took her place in the door, near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly, "What do you want?" Meekly, the child replied, My mammy said send her 50 cents. "I will not do it," the uncle retorted. "Now you run on home." "Yes, sir," the child replied, but she did not move. The uncle went on with his work, so busily engaged that he did not pay enough attention to the fact the child never left. And when he looked up and saw her still standing there, he yelled at her, "I told you to go on home. Now go, or I'll take a switch to you." The little girl said, "Yes, sir," but she did not budge an inch. The uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a barrel stave, and started towards the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness a murder. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. He knew that colored children were not supposed to defy white people in that part of the country. And when the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mammy's gotta have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, then slowly laid the barrel stave on the floor. He put his hands in his pocket, took out $50 and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed towards the door, never taking her eyes off the man who she had just conquered. And after she had gone, the uncle sat down on a box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby, too, was doing some thinking. That was the first time in all his experience that he had seen a colored child deliberately master an adult white person. How did she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child use that made her master over her superior? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find the answer until years later when he told me the story. Strangely, the story of this unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill on the very spot where the uncle took his whipping. Strangely, too, I had devoted nearly a quarter of a century to study of the power which enabled an ignorant, illiterate colored child to conquer an intelligent man. As we stood there in that musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use that so completely whipped my uncle?" And the answer to this question will be found in the principles described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains details and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force which the little child accidentally stumbled upon. And keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers and place at your command for your own benefit this same irresistible power. The awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or a purpose. Again, it may come and cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lesson by which you can regain all that you lost through defeat. And after I had described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little colored child, he quickly retracted his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due in no small degree to the lesson he had learned from that child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in that little old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance, and I said to myself, I gotta make this sale. The better portion of all sales I have made were made after people had said no. He recalled, too, his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from gold, but he said, that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may get, a lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. This story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the colored child in the gold mine, doubtless will be read by hundreds of men who made their living by selling life insurance. And to all of these, the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes to these 2 experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Life is strange and often imponderable. Both the success and the failures have their roots in simple experiences. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace and simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in life. Therefore, they were as important to him as life itself. He profited by these 2 dramatic experiences because he analyzes them and found the lesson they taught. But what of the man who has neither the time nor the inclination to study failure in the search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how is he to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones of opportunity? In answer to these questions, this book was written. The answer called for a description of 13 principles, but remember, as you read, the answer you may be seeking to the questions which have caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life may be found in your own mind through some idea, plan, or purpose which may spring into your mind as you read. One sound idea is all that one needs to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain the best and the most practical of all that is known concerning ways and means of creating useful ideas. And before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. When riches begin to come, they come quickly, in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years. This is an astounding statement, and all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. And when you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with the state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, with little or no hard work. You and every other person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research analyzing more than 25,000 people because I too wanted to know how wealthy men became that way. Without that research, this book could not have been written. Here, take notice of a very significant truth. The business depression started in 1929 and continued on to an all-time record of destruction until sometime after President Roosevelt entered office. Then the depression began to fade into nothingness, just as an electrician in the theater raises the light so gradually that darkness is transmuted into light before you even realize it. So did the spell of fear in the minds of the people gradually fade away and become faith. Observe very closely. As soon as you master the principles of this philosophy and begin to follow the instructions for applying those principles, your financial status will begin to improve and everything you touch will begin to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible? Not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. But this book was written for those who seek the rules which have made others successful and are willing to stake everything on those rules. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did with it was to turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do. The success comes to those who become success conscious. Success comes to those who become success conscious. I'm going to say that again. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek it to learn the art of changing their minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. And another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and beliefs. Some who will read this will believe that no one can think and grow rich. They cannot think in terms of riches because their thought habits have been swept into poverty, want, misery, failure, and defeat. These unfortunate people remind me of a prominent Chinese who came to America to be educated in American ways. He attended the University of Chicago, and one day President Harper met this young Oriental on the campus. So I do apologize for these slurs. This book was written, I can't remember when, but it was written a long time ago. So the language for melanated people, the language to refer to other cultures is a little, so bear with me. It's definitely worth getting through the book though. So one day President Harper met this young Oriental on the campus, so someone of like Chinese Asian descent. stopped to chat with him for a few minutes and asked what had impressed him as being the most noticeable characteristics of the American people. "Why," the Chinaman exclaimed, "the queer slant of your eyes. Your eyes are off slant." What do we say about the Chinese? We refuse to believe that which we do not understand. We foolishly believe that our own limitations are the proper measure of limitations. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant because they are not the same as our own. The irony. Millions of people look at the achievements of Henry Ford after he had arrived and envy him because of his good fortune or luck or genius or whatever it is that they credit for Ford's fortune. Perhaps one person in every 100,000 knows the secret of Ford's success, and those who do know are too modest or too reluctant to speak of it because of its simplicity. A single transaction will illustrate the secret perfectly. So the next story is going to be on, what page is this? Page 29. And the next time I read, we will start off with the story of Henry Ford. And we're still in the introduction, but like I said I was going to stop at one story, and then on the next read we'll go through that story. So thank you so much for joining me today for this read. I hope that these seeds of wisdom and the stories inspired some thoughts and some insights within you. So feel free to like, comment any thoughts that came up or any insights, and share this with someone you think could benefit from this reading. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe and make sure you hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when I do my next reading. Till next time, peace and love.